Hello, in this video I want to show you the evolution of the Glock pistol from Generation 1 to Generation 4. We have here 4 Glock 17s. On here you can see the Generation 1, Generation 2, 3 and 4. And I will show you the differences and look what's inside and tell you something about the parts. First we take a closer look on the pistols from the outside, so what you can see when the pistols are not disassembled. So let's see the Glock Generation 1. As you can see, the grip has no texture, no finger rails. Then you have only one bolt here, no mounting rail on the grip. Generation 2 started with texture on the frame, as you can see here, and on the back. Also only one bolt and no rail, no mounting rail. Generation 3 has the finger rails and the texture between the rails, also on the back side. There are 2 pins and there is the mounting rail. Generation 4, also finger rails. The texture is also on the grip here, and I think it's more rough than on Generation 3. There are also multiple back straps. You can change this part, and the Glock 17 Generation 4 is on a short frame. So for people with smaller hands it's perfect. You have other or different magazine release button, and you have also the mounting rails, and of course the 2 bolts. Between Generation 3 and Generation 4, Glock released another grip. This was called the RTF 2. As you can see, the texture is a bit rougher than on the Generation 4. First we take a closer look on the magazines. Left Generation 1, right Generation 4. There are some differences, but all magazines work in all generations. As you can see, here had been some changes, and the biggest change is on Generation 4. This part. This is for the magazine catch, can be mounted on the right side for left-handed shooters. And here you can see the magazines from the back side. All magazines 17 rounds. As you can see, the metal parts inside have changed a bit from Generation 1 to Generation 4. But all magazines work in all generations. Now we take a closer look at the grips. Left Generation 1, right Generation 4, and here is the RTF 2 with the grips, because it is a different grip, and so I also look at this grip. As you can see, the back side, the texture. You can see Generation 2 and Generation 3 have the same texture on the back. RTF 2 and Generation 4. When we look inside the grips, the safety mechanism is the same on all generations. Just a few differences, because the steering block of Generation 1 and Generation 2 had only 1 pin. Generation 3 to 4 has 2 pins. And then we look at the front, and you will see Generation 1 to 3, also RTF 2, have the same front, and Generation 4 is a bit bigger here. This is because of the double spring of the Generation 4. Now let's see what's inside of the grips. We have Generation 1 here, and Generation 4 is the one here. So, as I already told you, Generation 1 and Generation 2 2-bolt models, Generation 3 and 4 3-bolt models. The differences are in the slide catch. I hope you can see it. The slide catch on the Generation 1 looks different than on the other generations, so I hope you can see the difference now. The trigger mechanism with the connector here, the trigger spring, the trigger hasn't changed from Generation 1 to Generation 2, and also it hasn't changed to Generation 3 and Generation 4. I think there is a small change in the extractor from Generation 1 to Generation 2, and then they always took the same extractor. When we take a look at the steering blocks, you will see Generation 1 and Generation 2 have the same steering block. Generation 3 is a bit different than Generation 4, but I don't know if the difference is only this here or if the size is different. So when I put them together, they look like as they have the same size, and so there should be no problem if you want to change Generation 3 or Generation 4. Should be the same size and I think the same operation. And also from this side they look like they are the same. When we take a closer look on the trigger mechanism, you can see that the connector is another material or has a different color between Generation 1 and Generation 2. 3 and 4 then have the same connector. And also this part, which operates the firing pin safety, has changed from Generation 1 to Generation 2, and 3 and 4 are equal with Generation 2. Just to make the video complete, we also take a look in the empty grips. On the right, Generation 1, left, Generation 4. When I put the slides together, I recognized another small difference. It's on the trigger mechanism. The part that pulls in the firing pin safety looks a bit different on Generation 4, as you can see, as on Generation 3, and Generation 2 is same like Generation 3. Now let's have a look at the slides. As you can see, left Generation 1, right Generation 4. The same system in all the slides. There are the differences in the slide springs. Generation 1, Generation 2 and Generation 3 have the same slide spring, but I think in Generation 2 there was a time when they built in the same slide spring as in Generation 1, and they changed it after a few years. And the big difference, Generation 4 with the double spring, which reduces muzzle flip and recoil, and also small differences in this part here. As here you can see the slide springs, Generation 1 on the left, Generation 4 on the right. So now let's take a look at the slides and the inner parts of the slides. As you can see, from left to right, Generation 1 on the left, Generation 4 on the right. The big difference in the slide is this part here on Generation 4. It is different to Generation 1, 2 and 3 because of the double spring. Now let's take a closer look to the inner parts of the slide. As you can see, Generation 1 on the left, Generation 4 on the right. There is a difference in the firing pin and the material from Generation 1. As you can see, it's black, not as the other ones. There is also a different firing pin. You can see the detail here. Look at Generation 2. Generation 2 to Generation 4 have the same parts. Then the extractor looks different in Generation 1, different in Generation 2. Generation 3 has a new one, and Generation 4 has the same as Generation 3. In this picture you can see the extractors from the other side, just to make it complete. We take a closer look at the firing pin safety. The firing pin safety from Generation 1 is smaller than on the other generations. Here you can see the slides from the other side. As you can see, the big difference, Generation 4 is bigger on the front. I hope you can see that the slide looked better and better from generation to generation. Generation 1 and 2 look very equal. Generation 3 and Generation 4 look a bit better. Now let's have a look at the barrels. There is a small difference on this side when you look at this part here. Now we have all 4 barrels, and I hope you can see it. I think the steering curve is exactly the same on all 4 generations. When we take a look from here, you can also see a difference. Generation 1, when you look at this part. Glocks Generation 1 and Generation 2 have been delivered in boxes like that on the left side. Generation 3 and 4 on cases like on the right side. I think the name Tupperware pistol didn't only came because of the polymer frame. I think it was because of these boxes. The Glock 17 Generation 1 came out in 1983. The Generation 2 came out in 1989. Generation 3, the 3-pin model, came out in 2002. And the Generation 4 came out 2010. As you could see on the video, the revolution started in 1983 because the Glock pistol changed the pistol market, and they set the standard for pistols, for self-defense and with the safety mechanism. Then to Generation 4, it wasn't a revolution, just an evolution. There were some parts changed, and these parts made the Glocks better. And I think if you already have a Glock, then there is no need to buy a new generation, because the old models also work perfect. But if you want to buy a new Glock and you have the money, because the price is a bit higher than an old model which is used, and if you have the money, I would prefer the Glock 17 Generation 4 because it's the best model yet. I like the grip. The texture isn't too rough, but it's rough enough. There are some changes like the magazine release, which are very useful, especially for a left-handed person. And I think the biggest difference is the double spring, which reduces the muzzle flip and the recoil. And so for me, the Generation 4 is the best model. But as I told you, if you already have a Glock, there is no need to change it to a new model. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye bye.